on how MACDC came to this work before I introduce our panel. In 2012, MACDC and the Massachusetts Minority Contractors Association launched a new initiative to achieve higher rates of minority business enterprise and women business enterprise utilization on CDC-sponsored construction projects in the city of Boston. At that time, 6 CDCs enrolled 12 projects in the program and collectively generated more than $54 million in business opportunities for minority and women-owned businesses. Specifically, those 12 projects had achieved a utilization rate of 36% for MBEs, 7% for women. And at the time that the projects closed, a combined utilization rate of 40%. Now, going back to the origins of the Boston pilot program, that the threshold numbers that we set for MBE utilization was 30%. For WBEs, it was 10%. And we didn't necessarily have a combined number. But in 2016, MACDC and MMCA, the Mass Minority Contractors Association, launched the second phase of this program, and the desire was to add a few more CDCs from the greater Boston area to the program and identify some additional projects to add into the mix. We're pleased to note that phase 2 of the program has allowed 4 additional CDCs to join the original 6, and I won't name them all, but they are listed on our website. We believe all CDCs that participate in this program will benefit from the shared learning of the group, the political support that MACDC, MMCA, and our partners at MHIC can bring to these projects, as well as the networks and connections that we can provide to MBEs and WBEs, and the notable goodwill that comes with participating in a proactive effort to expand economic opportunity across our communities. While the focus on this program is MWBE participation, there is consistent evidence that achieving these goals will also result in the hiring of more people of color on these projects, thereby achieving yet another key economic development goal of diversifying our shared workforce. As I mentioned, the original program had 6 participants. 2 of them are represented here today on the panel. And then I mentioned that the key goal of phase 2 was to enroll at least 10 participating CDCs and establish a pipeline of at least 20 separate real estate projects to bring into the program. As of June 30th of this year, 9 of the 10 participating CDCs have reported that 34% of the projected contract amounts, hard and soft costs combined, are going to minority business enterprise, and 9% are going to women business enterprise. And it represents, for these 21 projects, a total amounts contracted of almost $245 million. We outlined a series of commitments made by the participants and our partners at MMCA at the outset of this program. And namely, it was to make a best faith effort to achieve the 30% MBE and 10% WBE utilization rates on our construction projects, including both the hard and soft costs. We also wanted to promote and provide meaningful opportunities for MBEs and WBEs to serve as general contractors, as well as to provide professional services to the projects. And then another key commitment was the cooperation of CDCs in the program with MACDC on data collection efforts. So we can monitor and report on our progress, because we're trying to make this program as transparent as possible. And, there's a historical note there that I think Travis might speak to in his remarks. You know, it took a while for us to get here. We are excited about where we've come in 8 years, but it was at the behest of several prominent African American leaders in our community in Boston that really said to the CDCs, you know, it's time for you to step up. And our leadership took that to heart. And that was, again, Travis will speak a little bit to some of who those historical figures are in his remarks. Now I'd like to introduce the panel collectively and then in the order in which they'll present. And I've asked them each to speak, you know, 10 to 12 minutes, and then we'll reserve the balance of time for questions at the end. First, I want to introduce Travis Watson, who is the Community Impact Officer of the Massachusetts Housing Investment Corporation. And MHIC was founded in 1990 as a private nonprofit consortium, by a consortium of banks to fill a critical gap in meeting the credit needs of affordable housing developers at a time when the real estate market was quite tumultuous. And over the years, 30-odd years, they've developed an array of products. And Travis's role as the Community Impact Officer is he is responsible for ensuring that MHIC finance projects maximize minority-owned business and minority worker participation. And to help support him in this work, he created the Access and Opportunity Network, which is essentially a web-based portal that serves as a repository of news, strategies, resources, and best practices to help construction projects meet hiring goals for minority-owned businesses and people of color. Additionally, he serves as chair of the Boston Employment Commission, which oversees the Boston Resident Jobs Policy. Following Travis, we'll hear from Katrina Conrad Gwen. Katrina currently serves as the Workforce Development Manager at Madison Park Development Corporation, another one of the original 6 in the Boston pilot. They are a highly respected nonprofit real estate developer in Boston and one of the nation's oldest community development corporations. In her current position, Katrina ensures labor diversity compliance on all Madison Park construction projects, leading efforts to improve equity within the construction trades among female and minority workers in Boston, and providing technical assistance to local minority contractors that better positions them to gain access to Boston's lucrative building boom. Katrina also recently developed an innovative new construction workforce development pilot program, which she will speak to. This in partnership with Madison Park Technical Vocational High School and a coalition of local minority contractors who have agreed to serve as program instructors. And then we'll hear from Carlos Espinoza Toro. Carlos is the Director of Small Business Services at Jamaica Plain Neighborhood Development Corporation. Carlos is an MIT trained planner and architect with over 10 years of experience providing high quality bilingual technical education and support to an array of small business owners, startups, research partnerships, and nonprofits. And Carlos will talk about a program he's developed at JP&DC, their Small Contractor Success Initiative, and what it's meant for the community that they serve. And following the speakers, we'll hopefully have a few minutes for your questions. And if you submit them in the chat, I know Nadine and I will try to monitor them and be ready to go at the conclusion of Carlos's remarks. So I surrender the stage now to Travis Watson, my good friend.
Good afternoon. Is my audio working all right, everybody?
Yes.
Great. It's an honor and pleasure to be here today. Please forgive me, but I'm going to dive right in. Some of you may think or have heard that Boston is a union city. In a way, that's accurate. Union construction dominates downtown building scene. I even recall a Boston City Councilor uttering something like, "This is a union city," at a recent city council hearing. What has being a union city meant for Black workers and Black-owned businesses? Furthermore, how has that history contributed to Boston pushing for change today? Let's take a look. Please bear with me as I recap what most Black workers' experiences with construction unions in Boston look like. I'll begin in the 1950s. It's funny, David, earlier in your comments, you said you're gonna go back 8 years. I'm gonna go back about 8 decades. Bear with me, folks. I'll promise I'll try to be under time. 1950, so according to Joe Corbett, who joined the Carpenters Union, quote, "The BA sent two of us out one morning for a job, an Englishman and myself. The contractor put the Englishman on the job and told me in no uncertain terms that, quote, it's a disgrace for an N-word to come and apply for a job in the shop. An N-word's rightful place is on the railroad as a porter," end quote. 1968, the Boston version of the Model Cities program, the Boston Urban Development Program, BURP, was formed. Quote, "All the Black guys were laid off and all the French Canadians were kept," remembers Leo Fletcher, a carpenter on the job. "Somebody from out of the city, even out of the country, getting paid to do the work that I could do in my community." 1969, the United Community Workers was formed to combat discrimination faced in the BURP program. And according to former United Community Construction Worker activist Omar Cannon, quote, "They'd always say you had to be in the union to get a job, and you had to get a job to be in the union." 1970, Chuck Turner works as chairman of the Boston Black United Front and tries to help secure 2,000 minority construction workers union jobs via the Department of Labor's $680,000 grant for the Boston Hometown Plan. And in 74, through the Department of Labor's Manpower Training Act, Chuck Turner, Leo Fletcher, who I mentioned earlier, and others won funding for a third world jobs clearinghouse to act as a secondary source of labor for contractors seeking to fill hiring quotas on public supported jobs. But 2 years later, 2,000 to 3,000 white union construction workers marched on Boston City Hall demanding that the city council defund the clearinghouse. 1980, former construction worker Earl Quick recalls that, quote, "I got my book in 1980, and when I went down to the hall, I sat there for months. White guys would come in and go right into the business agent's office, and they'd get work, and me and the rest of the Black guys would just sit there. I never did work in Boston." That same year, a federal court in Boston found that the oral section of the exam given by the iron workers was so subjective and so open to abuse that it had almost no bearing on the ability to do the job. And for some reason, the court also found whites almost always passed the test, but Blacks almost always failed. Later in 83, Earl Quick states that when he did work, the union men on the job dropped bolts on him and called him the N-word and sunshine. And this one's very interesting. In 1986, according to Mark Ehrlich, who is a well-respected former white union carpenter, the affirmative action campaigns have changed the industry, though not dramatically. Many white union leaders and rank and file workers continue to express resentment at the presence, minimal as it is, of people of color in the trades. I want to be very clear here. Over a number of decades, while Boston's construction unions were building some of the nation's most impressive buildings, their white members were simultaneously building one of the nation's most powerful and deeply entrenched systems of racism. So where does that leave us today? Today, Boston is a majority minority city, but 0 construction unions in Boston have a person of color in a senior leadership position, and 0 construction unions in Boston will disclose how many people of color they have as members. Look, I love what unions represent, but my love for racial equity is far greater. That was the individual Black workers experience, right? So now let's shift quickly to Black-owned businesses, or what many of us commonly refer to as MBEs. Many of the challenges that we're facing today in Boston are the same challenges that brothers were facing in the 60s, the 1960s. It's the lack of technical assistance, the need for a strong back office, the lack of capital, and bonding requirements. It's these challenges mixed with the racism that I mentioned above that has created a landscape where I'd say well over 90% of greater Boston's MBEs are non-union, probably closer to 95% or so. So while many of the companies that folks on this panel work with operate in the open shop world, there aren't many of them that wouldn't want an opportunity on one of our many downtown projects. So, given how poorly Boston has treated Black construction workers, many would think it crazy to plant a flag of racial equity in that space. Here's one thing though, I see an opportunity for equity. And when I see opportunity, especially one mixed with racial injustice, I go all in. So for one, construction jobs, particularly union jobs, provide great wages and benefits. Construction jobs typically have a low barrier to get in, with many only requiring high school degree or equivalent in being able to pass a drug test. The brothers that I mentioned earlier, like Earl Quick, Chuck Turner, Leo Fletcher, they left us in great shape with a better understanding of which levers or trim tabs to pull and when. And if there was a time to push, it's now. We're living through the largest social movement in American history. I plan to take full advantage of people suddenly getting woke, especially those who are at the decision-making table and want to do better. The difference today in Boston, there's more white CEOs in Boston who are being intentional about their efforts to improve racial equity. But more importantly, Black and brown people are now beginning to liberate seats at the decision-making table. Funders, contractors, community development corporations, others are beginning to look less white and more reflective of the diversity of the city. And it's making some of the old guard nervous, actually. Another significant difference today is a formation of an informal network working to directly address many of the challenges that I spoke about earlier. My organization, EMIC, plays a role in this network, as do the two other organizations on this panel with me today. At EMIC, we have requirements for MBE and workers of color participation on projects that we finance. We launched an MBE financing program, and EMIC supports the Access and Opportunity Network, which David alluded to above earlier. The network serves as a repository of news, strategies, resources, and best practice to create a more equitable and inclusive construction industry for MBEs and people of color. One highlight of the site is an MBE database that we're beginning to work on expanding. We're working with their MBEs to get things like capability statements to better match them with projects that fall within their capacity and their skill sets. You're now about to hear about the fantastic work being done at both Madison Park Development Corporation and the Jamaica Plain Neighborhood Development Corporation. Both Katrina and Carlos are allies in this work, and I'm fairly certain you will be as inspired by their work as I am. As labor and civil rights leader Tyree Scott put it, you can't leave those who created the problem in charge of the solution. And in Boston, we sure as heck aren't doing that anymore. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Travis. Very good. Thanks for setting the table. Katrina, you're up.
It's a hard act to follow there, I must tell you. But I thank you all for allowing me to present to you this afternoon. Miss Nadine, if you don't mind, I'm gonna turn it over to you so we can get started. Just a quick little PowerPoint presentation to discuss my work here at Madison Park Development Corporation as their workforce development manager. Next slide, please. So recently we kicked off our Madison's Train to Trade program in response to the growing need of contractors in meeting the demands of the Boston residents' job policy, which currently in Boston, it stands at 51% Boston resident participation, 40% people of color, and 12% women, as far as those particular goals being necessary on all construction projects in the city of Boston. Next slide, please. So in response to the many number of contractors who claim they cannot meet these goals simply because there aren't a pool of qualified Boston residents, Madison Park allowed me to move forward with the creation of the Madison's Train to Trade pilot program. This gives residents a chance to learn firsthand from local contractors about their specific trade and how it is actually applied in the construction world. They are given the opportunity to gain OSHA 10 credentials, amongst many others, become familiar with construction plans and drawings, prepare for future immediate employment opportunities within the city, and more importantly, have continuous access to training and other employment resources. Next slide. So currently, our core curriculum is designed off of a model from the National Center for Construction Education and Research. So all of our participants will be introduced and or trained in OSHA 10, as I mentioned earlier, COVID-19 safety certification, basic construction math, introduction to hand and power tools, reading building plans and construction drawings, intro to electrical methods, painting, flooring, drywall, and other trades, and the most important, resume building and resume writing. Next slide. So why Madison's Train to Trade program? Well, currently within the city of Boston, all the programming that's designed for those who have an interest in getting or identifying a career in the trades is meant for youth, or let's say those who are just recently graduated from high school. However, our program is catered for adult learners ages 22 and up. It is the first virtual program of its kind in Greater Boston, and we have immediate access to hiring contractors through our real estate department here at Madison Park. And of course, as you can see by our stats from the last 5 years, we actually have the best track record for job placement in the construction sector. Next slide. So currently our milestones for our training program, the program was originally designed in partnership with Madison Park Vocational Technical High School. However, the pandemic forced us to move to a virtual platform. Initially, we enrolled 154 students in our session 1. 54 of those students received their OSHA 10, 54 completed their COVID-19 safety training. Prior to the completion of the program, or prior to their graduation, 17 of these participants were matched with employment, 12 were moved into the construction industry. 8 of our past participants attended our most recent virtual job fair, with 6 of those students actually being placed. And currently, as of, I think, September 21st, we rolled out our second session of the Madison's Train to Trade program with 45 students. A little fun fact, both sessions 1 and 2 of our training program, we actually enrolled more female participants than men. Next slide. So the future of our program, we're hoping that we can continue offering hands-on workshops featuring journey persons from our neighborhoods of color, particularly Roxbury, Mattapan, and Dorchester. We're working with the Department of Transitional Assistance in becoming a SNAP employment and training provider, so we can offer more resources to those individuals or residents in neighborhoods who are transitioning. We're also partnering more with local churches and organizations. My number one goal for 2021 is to actually offer a mobile classroom so I can move my training program from neighborhood to neighborhood. And of course, the focus is to always stay number one. Next slide. Within the workforce development program here at Madison Park, and more importantly, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, we created an MWBE contractor relief fund. Next slide. So in partnership with Life Sciences Cares, we have decided to build this relief fund, as I mentioned, to offer additional financial assistance to those contractors that are working in the city who could not tap into the PPP program. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, it is designed to assist local contractors in the construction sector with the necessary funds to keep their business afloat. So far this year, we've received over 30 applications from multiple industries. We have been able to grant over $26,000 to local contractors, including new MWBE subs that we've never worked with before. And our goal is to maintain the fund throughout 2021 so we can continue to serve as a resource for those contractors who have not been able to tap into any other resources. Next slide. So here are pictures from the students participating in both session 1 and 2 of our training program. The picture to your far left shows students meeting up to identify their lumber and materials that were needed to complete the Step Stool Challenge, which is the picture at the lower bottom of the slide. The picture to your right is a shot of our students showing up for their job shadowing sessions at our active job sites that we have here in Boston. Next slide, please. This is our most recent class, our outdoor hands-on workshop featuring Cruise Electric, which is a union-based electrical subcontractor here in Massachusetts. And they offer instruction to our students as far as introducing them to the basis of electrical work. Next slide. And my apologies, I jumped the gun by inserting my own Q&A slide, but I feel that this is the future of Madison Park development and future women in the trades. That's my granddaughter, so everyone meet Azari. And I'll
Nice.
save my questions for later. Thank you, though.
Nice touch, Katrina. I love that.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right, Carlos, you're on.
Thank you, David and Katrina and Travis. If Nadine could put the presentation. There we go. Great. So hello, everyone. My name is Carlos Espinosa. I am the Director of Small Business Services at JPNDC, the Jamaica Plain Neighborhood Development Corporation. And today I'm going to talk about the Small Contractors Success Initiative, which is a contractors program that combines technical assistance and mentoring to help small contractors of color grow. Next slide, please. Great, thank you. So the woman that you're seeing her name is Marquita Kelly. She's married to Glenn Kelly. When Marquita and Glenn came to our program in 2016, they had not yet been able to get a job that was worth more than $500,000. And they have always tried to gain this kind of access because they really needed to grow. Their mission at the moment was to not only become more certified and get more license, but also to teach others on the electrical trade. When I first talked to Marquita, she took advantage of every single one of the programs that we were able to provide in JPNDC, and most importantly of the SCSI program, the Success Initiative. Marquita was also matched with one of our mentors. His name is Mark Marcelli from NEI, a large GC here in the city of Boston. And Mark was able to help Marquita to present bids and also gave her a break to a certain degree for her to be able to do electrical jobs. Right now, Marquita has completely superseded every single one of our main hopes for her. She's now working directly with Mark Marcelli in most of her projects, and she and Glenn have been able to access jobs over $1 million. We're very proud of her. They're both the owners of NHK Electrical Contractors, and I put their information there because it's always very important to do marketing for them. Next, please. Vicky Gray. Vicky Gray is owner of a construction company called New Chapter Home Improvement. She is really amazing. She's always calling me. Vicky came to us in 2018 with the impetus and the energy to be good and to grow. That was her main goal. She wanted to make sure she take advantage of all the programs we offered them. She put a lot of energy, and she was also matched to a couple of our mentors, one of them Mark Marcelli, as well as Arnold Johnson from Crosswind Enterprise, another general contractor of color here in the city of Boston. Vicky is, for the most part, a painter. She has a painting contraction, but she also is trying to expand. When Vicky came, she wasn't able to access any job that were that had the kind of process that you must comply in order to access municipal and state jobs. She was not sure how to who to talk to. She wasn't sure how to navigate the process. We helped her do so. And now she has recently been offered a job with the federal government on painting several of their properties. And in addition to that, she keeps working with Mark Marcelli, and she has been offered several jobs to do painting for multifamily housing. She's growing. She still calls me a lot. Next, please. I'm going to make a little break here just to tell you a little bit more about the program. Early in 2016, we, JPNDC, came together in partnership with 3 contractors in the city of Boston that operate in the city of Boston, NEI being one of them, the other one Crosswind Enterprises, and a third one called Built Right Construction. We also teamed up with MMCA, the Massachusetts Minority Constructors Association, and we decided to offer a program that could provide not only technical assistance, but also knowledge. Travis has mentioned this very well, and I always pay attention to what he says regarding history. A lot of these contractors that are very successful right now are doing so because they have received oral tradition passed to them through generations. A lot of contractors of color have not received that. It is very important for us to think about the mentorship aspect because it is important for them to know those insights, tricks, and tips in order for them to be able to access a bid and win a bid in particular. So that's the main reason why we started this program. At the beginning of the program, when I was doing a presentation with the Massachusetts Minority Contractors Association, I remember one of the attendants came to me and said, a lot of people come here and tell us that there are opportunities for us to get these jobs, but nobody says to us how to do it. You guys seem to be doing that. So I'm gonna actually register for your program. This is Argentina Villar. Argentina Villar, the woman that is in this picture, is the owner of LV Home Improvement and Cleaning. She owns this company with Harlan Lara, her husband. They are a very clear example of what I just mentioned regarding getting people to actually know how to access jobs. When they first came to me, I wasn't sure exactly how to help them because they needed everything. And so what I did is I worked with her, took her by the hand, and helped her to go to every single one of those sites where she could apply, talk to people, network, etc. And she was tremendous. She also calls me a lot. And recently she was awarded, she is being awarded a cleaning contract with the city of Boston. And she has been asked to present a bid to extend that cleaning contract for 3 years. If you guys would know where she started, you will really realize how important it is to show people how to get there, how important it is to talk to them on the phone, to make sure I can be there as an interpretation when Spanish and English was not sometimes something that she could do things in Spanish, to be able to take her to the city of Boston procurement, to be able to help her understand why they were not calling her because it was as they needed contract. All of those hints and insights are important and critical for their success. Of course, we want to expand the program. We want to have more help because we do a high touch help. And so let me go to the last slide to tell you a little bit more about how the program works. Actually, go to the last slide, please. One more, there you go. I'm a little bit of a diagram geek, especially loose diagrams. I don't like for them to be completely finished, but I just wanted to let you know very quickly some of our numbers. Since we started in 2016, we have roughly 20 participants. We have them that have been able to access 120 contracts with a value of about $7.5 million. And these results were up to roughly December 2019. Because of the pandemic, we haven't been able to update them, but I'm very sure that there's much more than that. Very simply, I will mention that this diagram takes you from left to right, from the very beginning to the outcomes. And I want you to pay attention to the left part a little bit now, just so that you know that there are basics that must be there. And we are there to teach them and to make sure our contractors have them. On the right side, it's a little bit more advanced in which you start talking about vendor certification processes, estimation and bidding, and mentorship, which is probably one of the highest levels. And then at the end, we have the outcomes. Again, this is merely a diagram. Sometimes it doesn't work that way. But our mission is really to make sure that folks like Argentina Villar, Vicky Gray, and Marquita Kelly are growing. They are able to access bigger contracts, and they are able to access those bigger contracts with a value of over $1 million. So I'll end with that. Thank you.
Wonderful, Carlos. Thank you so much. That's great. And I can attest to how busy Carlos is and how much of demand is put upon him. Just trying to get a meeting with him last week to kind of coordinate for today. He gave me a window of time and he said, but you got to decide soon because, you know, my time might get filled up with my clients. And I'm like, okay, Carlos, okay. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate your commitment and dedication. He's also been very active in a roundtable that Joe Kreisberg has been leading since the outset of the pandemic, bringing a number of small business TA providers together to really advocate for more resources and kind of in response to the challenges for getting PPP loans out to folks in our community. We've been pressing the state for additional funds to go to the CDFI fund to make sure that you know, some of the underserved businesses in communities that we serve all across the state, quite frankly, can get access to resources in a way that they couldn't through the PPE program or PPP program. Sorry, too many acronyms. But at this point, I'd like to open it up for questions from the audience. And I'm trying to think if I should go to a full screen or gallery view and see if people want to raise their hands. I don't want to be too formal about this. You know, I've opened it up to folks. Can people unmute themselves, Nadine?
Yes. So if you have a question, you can just go ahead and unmute yourself.
So the floor is open. See a few old friends there. So. Any intrepid souls?
I'll ask a question.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you so much to the three of you for those fabulous presentations. Such great work going on in Boston and beyond. I'm Sarah Barkin from CDAC, for those I haven't met before. And I just have a question for Carlos, which is, how do you connect with firms who can benefit from your program? How do they find you? How do you find them?
Thanks, Sarah. What we do and what we've been doing is many different ways to engage and to do outreach. We have gone first through our partners, meaning we have asked MMCA, Massachusetts Minority Contractors Association, to distribute and disseminate among their circles. Also MHIC with Travis. I remember I asked him several times, could you please disseminate this information? We also ask folks and our partners that are GCs to disseminate information. And we also use our JPNDC list of emails and social media to distribute the information. And that's how we started to get the first core. After that, it has been with social media and those techniques as well, but also word of mouth, meaning that our contractors have actually called and let other contractors know of the opportunity. Having said that, we can do better. Definitely, we can try to reach out to more folks. But I just want to end up by saying that one of the biggest challenges that we have is the time. And so sometimes it's very difficult for folks to be able to provide time because they have to be on call or they have to be there at the job site. And we try to do our best, but it's always a challenge.
Very good.
I'll ask a question. Hi, David. Kathy from MHIC here, and this is for really any of the panelists. I think there's a perception, particularly once the construction moratorium lifted, that all contractors have more work than they could possibly need right now, because you have not only all the construction restarting, but also people home doing home improvement projects. So small contractors have access to that work. I'm curious from your perspective if that is a misconception and or if there's a different reality for MBE contractors than there may be for others. I know, Katrina, you said you have your grant program, so obviously there's some contractors that are having a hard time. So I don't know if any of you want to speak to that.
Who would like to go first? From my experience, I'm finding that more of my MWBE contractors are sitting the sidelines, if you will, because of the delay in work, right? So in a lot of instances, these open shop contractors are leaning more on your private homeowners for their pipeline as far as upcoming work. There have been instances where I've noted some contractors will engage a specific pool of MWBE contractors to assist them on some projects so they can keep up with the pace of work, because now it is in demand, and they have committed themselves on multiple projects. So it's a catch-22. It just depends on, I guess, how big the projects are and what the capabilities are of those particular contractors. But I have seen it in both instances. Yes, ma'am. And thank you for the question, Ms. Kathy. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Carlos, Travis, any insights there to offer?
The only thing that I would add, and it's probably not directly answering your question, is that in the past 6, 7, 8 months, as the social climate of the nation has changed, and to use a pop culture term, as more people are becoming woke, I've been seeing more projects in Boston, greater Boston area have goals or expectations or requirements for either, MBEs or WBEs. But at the same time, the number of MBEs hasn't been increasing. So there's definitely a bit of a supply and demand push and pull there. That very glad that there's folks like Carlos and Katrina helping on the pipeline. But I have noticed, it's interesting, even on some of the projects that we're financing over at MHIC, one GC is on 3 different projects, and it's like there's only so many MBE HVAC contractors that can do $1.5 million. That's not many of them, but all of a sudden you've got like 19 projects who all of a sudden all have MBE or WBE goals. And typically one of the best practices is let's go for a mechanical trade, because it's a big dollar. You can get a lot of your participation on one contract. But I definitely have been seeing folks have had to get a lot more creative, I think.
I would just add that's been one of the harder nuts to crack, and I celebrate Katrina's program and Carlos's outreach to help both train new workers, a new cohort of workers, and to help elevate some of these smaller contractors to a higher capacity where they can take on bigger projects and do more work. But I have talked to other CDCs that are part of the Boston Pilot program, and they pointed out what Travis just alluded to, that in a time of scarcity, when everyone's going for the same GCs and there are only a few of them, it becomes you pay a premium in some ways, and our folks, particularly those in the, well, I would say all of our folks, but certainly the ones in the pilot program are committed to meeting their best faith goals, but it can cost more because of there just are not enough minority and women business enterprise to satisfy demand. So arguably that'll be a good problem to have as more people, more CDCs come in and participate at this level, but we do need to be mindful of the training and the outreach necessary to kind of drive younger people to these professions. Because
I will say too that yes, but some of our general contractors and developers need to recognize that they're going to need to get a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that they need to start working with subcontractors or general contractors that they haven't worked with in the past. And I think that's one of the one of the cautions to that is there's risk there, right? It's like, hey, I worked with Tony all the time and I know Tony's going to lay that so much sheetrock in this amount of time and I can't take that risk. But I think, again, I don't want to keep coming back to Katrina and Carlos' programs, but I think particularly in Boston, because they have, for lack of a better term, such intimate relationships with these contractors and these workers, and because they're both so well respected and the organizations are well respected, they can play a critical role in between, almost like a liaison between maybe an uncomfortable developer or GCs who might be a little bit uncomfortable. It's like, no, hold on. I've worked with them. Their back office is tight. Their payroll is going to be on in a week. They've got the insurance, they've got the bonding, they've got the capacity, and here's 3 previous projects that they've worked on. So I think we're all trying to work on this ecosystem to help. On one side, I understand from a business perspective the risk, but on the other hand, we're all moving forward in the city of Boston towards equity and inclusion, and folks have just got to get uncomfortable. But the more supports and structures that are put in place to make it a little bit easier to swallow, I think the better off we'll all be.
Well said. Well said.
I wanted to add very quickly to what Travis has mentioned, that there is certainly an element of risk that it is important to acknowledge. For instance, when I spoke with my real estate director here at JPNDC to further understand how we conducted a process to hire folks, I started to understand more and more about how there's already a machine that is working very strongly. And if you want to stop the machine to add something new, there has to be something there to help it. I think that, for instance, I just want to add something that hopefully will be spicy. If some of those projects that are funded by the public, by the cities and by the state, could add some money to be able to pay more for contractors of color within the bid, maybe, so they could subsidize some of that learning curve, might be interesting. But anyway, I just wanted to acknowledge that there is that barrier, and that barrier is held by the numbers. The numbers don't lie, right? People will say, well, I'll hire you, but where are your numbers? Lower those numbers. Right? It's always helped by the bottom line, but we can certainly help at a much higher policy level.
I know there got to be more questions out there. Don't want to let this expertise get away from you.
I have another, this is just a thought that resulted from what Carlos just said, which is we all know, to put it mildly, you pay a premium when you use union labor, yet that is fully accepted where that needs to happen. So if this is really important to us, if racial equity and inclusion is really important to us, why shouldn't we pay more to build the systems to make it work for everybody, and to support more contractors and more subcontractors?
It's a great point, Kathy. Excellent.
God, I love that. And it's not just because you used to be my boss. Oh, friggin' awesome, man. I never thought of it that way. So true.
That's great. That's a
Thank you
great,
for that.
that could be our 2021 policy, one of our policy pushes. I like that.
I want to add more spice to the pot, if I may.
Please, more. I always want more spice.
I was listening to Travis talk on NPR when he was talking about, how it's important to keep people accountable, to keep GCs accountable. And so the other thing that comes to my mind is maybe we have to get stronger on that. I mean, we have all these folks who need money, pipelines, but maybe there has to be deeper penalties. Maybe it has to be more serious. I remember I was frustrated one day and I told somebody, why doesn't anybody go to jail? And that person said, no, we don't want to do that. But I just want to say, we're not symbolic. We have to be able to have commissions like BEC, the Boston Employment Commission, to actually be able to to people be like, no, I'm going to get in trouble. I really need to hire people. I need to do better. You know, that's on the stick side, I guess.
Yeah. I think that's fair, Carlos. The fact that no one's willing to challenge it because they think they might lose is not a solution to you know, failure to meet the need. I mean, I think it's like a lot of things. It's got to be challenged, and you gotta at a minimum make people show themselves for, you know, what they are or are not doing. And if that's through the courts, it's great. I salute Travis for his eruption last week, and I thought that was great, because a lot of people don't know that, or, you know, people are too satisfied with hearing the same thing, and then to hear certain policy people say, "Oh, we can't do that. We can't enforce it." Blah, blah. I'm like, well, really? Have you tried? So anyway, I'm with you, Carlos, and I'm not the kind to, you know, freely say lock them up, but some people should be locked up for real offenses.
And as I said earlier, and it's making some of the old guard nervous. Yes, keep on, brother. It is. Yep.
Well, we just have just a few minutes. I'm, you know, don't want to be one of those, you know, headmasters or teachers that keeps you to the bell. If there are no other questions, I'm grateful for all of you that did join us today, and I'm certainly grateful to our panelists. Give them a round of applause, or you can wave at them or whatever. And then I'm certainly most appreciative of the support I've gotten from Nadine and Leah to make sure that we didn't go off the rails. Thank you. Thank you.